Okay. Seems I've been confusing the record button with the stop button. Wasting a lot of time. Yeah, a little vodka Gatorade. Please my doctors, my muses at the same time. Okay. As always, it's good to begin with a bit of a ditty. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day, my oh my, oh, what a wonderful day. Plenty of sunshine coming my way. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. So, Blaming Jeffy Writer, 2010. And, I open each chapter with a quote from Allen Ginsberg's Howl. Howl is a very important poem to me. And I suspect that Howl and several other important papers of the Beats were never read by many people. And that immediate earlier circle, I think it was widely read and widely popular. But I think people lost track of it. They all want to do their own thing, make their own movement, be their own Kerouac. So things got pretty confused. The opening quote here is be about line 12. I wasn't all that careful about that. From Ginsberg, incomparable blind streets of shuddering cloud and lightning, and the mind leaping toward poles of Cannon and Patterson, illuminating all the motionless world of time between. God, those guys were good. Jeez. Supposedly that was like I say, I'm not good at poetry. I don't get much of it. I like reading intellectual stuff. Freud and Jung floats my boat a whole lot better than poetry, and it's always occluded my Zen and Tibetan studies. And the Aitken Roshi used to laugh at me sometimes when I came up with my koan answers. I'm not sure if that's rare or not, but kind of shook me up. In about 1900 or so, I had the temerity to write a letter to Allen Ginsberg, enclosing a sample of my poetry and asking if he wouldn't mind reviewing it. To my surprise, he answered, writing his review of my work on the back of a letter I'd written him. In his own hand, he commented that my writing was a head trip, and that I should read more Kerouac. He also told me that Trungpa's poetry had been positively influenced by discussions with Allen and some of the other beats. I was quite pleased to have heard from him at all, and made a mental note to read more Kerouac. I never wrote that much poetry anyway, but as I was writing it somewhat in the Tibetan style, I was curious about Allen's take on it. Or anyone's take on it, really. I suspected that Allen just wasn't sure if he knew me or not, and so he'd responded just in case. It was funny. He and Peter Orlovsky were washing pots at this Dharma Center one time, and I was working there, and I was kind of hanging out by the coffee machine smoking a cigarette, and Allen came up to me and borrowed a cigarette, and I said, "Hey, you're Allen Ginsberg, aren't you?" And he said, "Yes." And that was pretty much it. And he went back to washing pots, and I thought, how about that? I met Allen Ginsberg. And but after that, I saw him a few more times, and he always waved at me, very friendly and smiley and welcoming. I said, "Oh my God!" And I never could figure out why, because he just borrowed a cigarette. It wasn't like he owed me anything. And I just figured he thought I was an old student or somebody he'd met somewhere along the line, or wasn't really sure, so he was just being nice. But it was really cool. One time we were walking down a trail from a thing called the Purkong, and this huge crowds are going up and down, back and forth, and Alan's walking down there, and hey, and it made me look important. Continuing, it took me quite a number of years to actually get to reading Kerouac, as Alan suggested, and around the same time I decided to write this memoir. I read Kerouac with Alan's advice in mind, and also with an eye toward getting some sense of how to write a memoir. My writing experience was limited to lots of academic material and a couple of screenplays, so I needed some idea of what to do with a memoir. While in Monterey, I would frequent a bar that was an old Steinbeck haunt just up the street from Cannery Row. I wondered if Kerouac had been there. Big Sur, a place he had visited and a title of one of his memoirs, was just 45 minutes away, and he may have stopped in looking to chat with Steinbeck. I checked around a bit and found out the 102-year-old owner of that bar remembered Steinbeck but had never liked him. Steinbeck was a bit of a drunk, according to her, and would often mooch drinks from people. I thought about her asking her directly about Kerouac, but her daughter and caretaker told me that her memory was failing and she wasn't so well, and so I didn't want to bother her. What was really interesting to me was that the woman was still able to come down to the bar from the apartment upstairs, which she did on Thursdays, when she would have a few drinks. On her 102nd birthday, she actually had 8 drinks and left a bit drunk. Steinbeck and his friends also had a habit of scooping up drinks deserted by exiting patrons, mixing the leftovers into a cocktail, and then drinking that to save money. I checked around some more, and a couple of guys in their 90s said the pictures I showed them looked very familiar, but they couldn't say for sure if they knew him. In his memoir entitled Big Sir, Kerouac discusses Monterey, but pretty much just as the last bus stop from San Francisco on the way to Big Sur. He had to hitchhike the last 45 miles. He was waiting for a bus at one point in Monterey on his way back to San Francisco, and he wandered the streets of Monterey a bit, but there is no mention of him going into the city far enough to look for Steinbeck. It sounded to me like Kerouac just wandered around close to the bus station. The Steinbeck haunt is about 2 miles away. I chose Kerouac's Dharma Bums for the first book to read. At first, his reports of the beat study of Buddhism heartened me, but later I was aghast at these descriptions. His depiction of the poet, Jaffe Ryder in particular. Kerouac was very widely read by the beats and the hippies, the Dharma Bums that is. Buddhists who were traveling around different centers or just reading on this subject also read a lot of Kerouac. I'm sure millions of copies at least were sold, and in dozens of different languages. What bothered me was that Kerouac, in his ever generous and gentle manner, described scenes with Jaffe Ryder having sex in the Tibetan ritual style on the floor during parties and with multiple partners, and Jaffe always encouraging others to do the same. Kerouac never criticized Jaffe. Further, he reported that Jaffe said that the Tibetans were like that, and that this was what Tibetan Buddhism was all about: cross-legged sex on the floor in front of other people. A great Chinese lie, I thought. At first, I thought it was irresponsible of Kerouac even to mention such a thing, but then I decided that as he wasn't that much of a scholar, he might actually have believed Jaffe, and Jaffe might have believed the Chinese. It would be difficult to know, as Kerouac always reported gently rather than critically. But in the memoir, Kerouac comes off as too shy and actually too respectful of women to have tried the Jaffe variations on Tibetan practice himself. But as Jaffe had pretenses to being an expert in Zen and things Buddhist, and his translation of Chinese Zen poetry, which could be done with a dictionary, into English gave him a bit of a credentials in the area. I thought that he should have been more discerning and less licentious in his rapid jump to conclusions on the Tibetan lifestyle. There is certainly nothing to suggest that he had done any reading or practice that would have led him to those orgiastic conclusions, other than credulity, of course, in the face of the critics of Tibet. The Chinese, those who would dismiss the entirety of the culture and the religion with that one foolish lie. Why did they snap their fingers? Or was that just a TV thing? Like I said, I've seen a lot of them, never met them. Tried to meet Ann Waldman. I kind of thought she was interesting, and I thought she might be, interesting sort of person to know. Now, I guess my real intention was if I knew her even a little bit, I might meet women. Good-looking, nice, beatish kind of women. Yeah. But a bevy of her protectors. Or her soi-disant protectors always got in my way. So, like I said, I just wanted to chat with her, make an interesting comment, and see what anything would happen. Not that I had any interesting comments to make. Love her poetry, though. Yeah, it's. But the beasts, the hippies, that whole thing turned into a squawking lunatic kind of a thing. Not so much. If you actually, read Kerouac, which I didn't do for 30 years, or Kerouac's instructions on how to write beat poetry. Anyway, let's just call this video 2.